Hello and welcome to CIA News Analysis. Tomorrow's crypto news today. In our episode today, we're going to go through quite a bit of articles, as you can see across the top. The first half is going to be about the United States, and the second half is going to deal with the international community. I'm going to do my best to be concise and get to the point so that we can have a great episode that gets everybody caught up on where this market is as we head into the new Bitcoin bull market. Our first article here is Bakkt to launch consumer app in first half of 2020. Will test product with Starbucks. It's good to see that Bakkt is going to be working with Starbucks, which is a very mainstream company. A lot of people go there and drink their coffee, so it'll be great to see Bitcoin be integrated into a payment system and reward system that we see Starbucks using. This could really mean a lot for bringing Bitcoin further into the mainstream conscience. In our second article, we see that the Chicago Mercantile Exchange reveals details of upcoming Bitcoin options contracts. Now, of course, there are regulatory questions in the United States, and we are moving at a slower pace here than other countries are internationally. Definitely bullish to see the CME adding another tool that investors can use to make sure that they are properly allocated, hedged, whatever their strategy may be as they move into the cryptocurrency market. This is definitely a sign that more sophisticated, smart money is coming into the market rather than just retail money. In our next article, we see that Ripple expands into Washington, D.C., and they're not the first. EOS also expanded into Washington, D.C. So we're seeing some of these more centralized cryptocurrencies or crypto companies. We've been saying since 2015, Ripple is a centralized pre-mined coin. It's not a decentralized blockchain technology like Bitcoin. There's no cryptonomic cycle. There's a completely different makeup there, but that's not what we're focusing on. What we're focusing on is the fact that they're spending resources expanding into Washington, D.C., because that's where the laws are being written and that's where the lobbying is going to be done. This is bullish for the Ripple project, even though that's not bullish for the freedom of finance. But ultimately what we see here is the market moving forward and companies becoming more aggressive as we enter a key time frame where, somewhere probably in the next 4 to 8 years, these laws that are going to lay the foundational groundwork for the future financial system are going to be drafted. Certain companies are going to be able to sway that law one way or another based on whether or not they're in Washington, D.C., and they have a lobbying group and a lobbying budget. So it's going to be very interesting to see how some of these more centralized projects try to wiggle their way in and really expose the true problem we have with politics, which is money talks, and they can try to steer this legislation in a way that's more favorable to them. The fact is, though, is that this is happening and crypto companies are expending resources to make this happen. And we know this is true because we're going to see this in the next couple of articles. Here we see right here that U.S. Congressman says Facebook should add Bitcoin, not create Libra. He says that Facebook already filters content. Some people say this with bias. Some people say it's great. They're protecting my safe space. So do we want filtered speech or free speech? Do we want filtered transactions or freedom? I think there's two main points to take away here. First, that a U.S. Congressman, Representative Warren Davidson, is actually talking about Bitcoin in Congress. And second of all, that he has the false assumption that Bitcoin is a non-filtered transaction and that, with Bitcoin comes financial freedom. It's the opposite is true. Sure, Libra would be fully centralized and you'd be selling your financial data to Facebook. So, he has a point there, but Bitcoin does not break you free from that. Bitcoin, too, can be tracked and traced. So you have to be careful that these congressmen, understand what Bitcoin is and what the technology is, because simply put, Bitcoin is not fungible, meaning that it can be traced and that you give up your privacy. Monero and Pirate are two projects that are fully fungible, where, you're not going to be able to trace the transaction between users, whereas with Bitcoin you can completely trace that transaction. So it's exciting to see congressmen talking about Bitcoin, yet it shows that where we are within that process of them fully understanding the technology and where it's going. And we'll see that even more in our last article dealing with the United States before we switch to international news, where Congressman warns Bitcoin is a threat to the US dollar. He's right and he's wrong, and I'll go through and show you why. He's right because Bitcoin is a threat to the US dollar. It's that simple. The United States dollar is the reserve world currency. And if Bitcoin were to replace that currency, then it's the US people, the US dollar, that would lose its purchasing power. The US dollar would lose its status. Therefore, the Americans would hurt the most from that process. So as Americans, we want to warn our fellow Americans that they need to be prepared for the consequences of the policymakers who have led us down this path where the dollar is honestly a ticking time bomb. And you'll know from the Trump bump report, if we stay on this course, by the time Trump leaves office in his second term, the US dollar will pretty much be hyperinflated, barring Trump switching us to a gold-backed dollar or ending the Fed or nationalizing the Fed. Who knows what kind of plan he could have up his sleeve. But if everything continues on now and there is no change, then we're absolutely going into hyperinflation. We're absolutely going to see the dollar lose its status as the world reserve currency. And by the way, this is something that other countries want to see. They want to see the United States lose the world reserve currency. They're not happy with the petrodollar. China and Russia and Middle Eastern countries have been continuously working against the dollar. I mean, we went in and took out Gaddafi because he wanted to create the gold-backed dinar and sell oil for the dinar. So if you come against the petrodollar, you're going to have issues, because if you try to shake the dollar from the world reserve currency status, you would really shake the U.S. economy. So our military is going to defend that national security threat of shaking the U.S. economy. And this guy's spot on by saying that Bitcoin is a threat to the US dollar. Now, here's where he's wrong. This is what he says. Cryptocurrency either doesn't work, in which case investors lose a lot of money, or it does achieve its objectives, perhaps, and displaces the US dollar or interferes with the US dollar being virtually the sole reserve currency in the world. Sherman covered multiple benefits of the US dollar's dominance over other currencies for Americans, such as the profits generated by the Federal Reserve for the US Treasury, and the ability to influence other countries' policies and actions through the use of economic sanctions. We stand to lose all that because cryptocurrency is the currency of the crypto patriot, Sherman added. So, he's spot on. The US dollar could be, it could virtually lose its reserve currency status. And with that, we lose our ability to use economic sanctions and kind of our ability to police the world through economic warfare rather than actual traditional warfare. How many countries would have already fired that first shot if they had a way around the dollar or the sanctions of the dollar? If Trump couldn't cripple the Turkish economy or the Iranian economy through sanctions with the petrodollar, then who's to say they wouldn't have fired that first shot already? We don't know all the repercussions of the United States losing the power to use economic sanctions on other countries. And, this is inevitable. This is the world we're going to. This is Bible prophecy. U.S. congressmen are talking about these things, and this guy shouldn't be shilled for saying this because he's right. And we as Americans, and especially, being involved in the cryptocurrency market, we need to understand these things. It's not just about telling people about Bitcoin. It's about warning them about Bitcoin and preparing them for what's coming, because what's coming is inevitable. And we're going to see that in this next article as we move into the world stage. These things might be moving slow here in the United States, as they always do. But in the international world, things are moving forward rather quickly, which is maybe why some of these congressmen are getting so riled up. So in our first international article, we see that International Monetary Fund Chief Christine Lagarde calls for digital currencies, but we need to go further. She said, Lagarde's speech at Singapore FinTech Festival several days ago called on countries to issue their own digital currencies. Mind you, Lagarde called for a central bank administered and issued digital currency and not cryptocurrencies, stating specifically that a failure of states to do so could result in a situation where, quote, too much power could fall into the hands of a small number of private payment providers. See, so the central banks, they want to go digital, but they know that if they do so, they might actually create a rush to cryptocurrencies rather than their digital currencies. And we see that here in a response by some of her counterparts saying, if banknotes and coins have had their day, then in the near future, the general public will no longer have access to a state-guaranteed means of payment. In a cashless society, what would legal tender mean? It's just a matter of time, because we can see in our next article that IBM joins ING in saying central bank digital currencies are on the way. So these insiders, they already know, they've been to these forums, they've been to the meetups, they've been to the conferences, they know who the big players are and what they're saying. And here they are coming out and saying, central bank digital currencies, we can expect to see fiat-based digital currencies within the next 5 years. And it doesn't just stop there. We got more news where Bank of Canada exploring digital currency that would replace cash, track how people spend money. This is not just happening at the IMF or the BIS or in a few countries here and there. All over the world, internationally, banks are beyond experimenting with digital currencies. They've done their experiments and now they're saying, this is going to be a reality. It's moving extremely fast on an international scale. And you got these congressmen who are talking about Bitcoin, not really fully educated on Bitcoin, but they're worried. And here's why they're worried. President Xi says China should seize opportunity to adopt blockchain. The president of China, who is the president for life, by the way, we went in there thinking that if we show them democracy and we show them capitalism and we make them prosperous, then they'll change and want to be like us. Well, actually, they changed and got worse. They made this guy president for life, so that now they have a dictator again. So it got worse, and our plan is not working in China, and now China and Russia are our biggest threats economically. And now those guys are saying we need to take blockchain and we need to take it to the next level. Well, why are they saying that? Why is President Xi saying we should operate within blockchain and we should try to be on top of this and be a front runner and take advantage of this technology? Because it's going to help them dethrone the dollar as the world reserve currency. And look, Binance CEO says Putin is the most influential person in blockchain. So here's the president of Russia being considered by the biggest cryptocurrency exchange in the world, Binance, as being the most influential person in blockchain. So you got the Chinese president coming out saying we need to be on top of this, we need to figure this out, we need to use this technology to our advantage. Why? Because they're working together not only through a way to trade oil without the petrodollar, but also as a way to use technology to dethrone the dollar as the world reserve currency. You take away the dollar as the world reserve currency, the United States can no longer be the world police. And that's what they want to do. They want to dethrone the United States as the world police and then pursue their own specific agenda. Best way to do that is to remove the US dollar as the world reserve currency. It is economic warfare, and the United States is on the losing side. So if you're watching this and you're a United States citizen, you need to wake up. You need to get ready. A new bull run's coming, and guess what? We are not far away from that bull run. I think we're 10 days from the 180-day to halving window. So if you don't know why that's important, go ahead and read the Cryptonomics report, and you'll find out why you should be excited about where we are right now. But also, if you're a U.S. citizen, you'll find out why you need to be prepared for where we are in the market right now. And in the last article, Bitcoin trading spikes as Argentina bans buying more than $200 a month. So not that long ago, Argentina came out and said, hey, you can't take any of the pesos and you can only buy $10,000 worth of US dollars per month. Basically trying to stop people from, it's called capital flight, because Argentinians themselves, they no longer want that fiat-backed peso, which is just nothing. It's an IOU from a government that has nothing. So it's not a fair value of exchange. It's not a store of value. It's not doing anything for them. Actually, it's costing them money, and they're losing money through inflation. The government itself is now saying you can't buy more than $200 worth of dollars per month. Basically, Argentina is most likely going to be the next Venezuela. Its currency is dying, and Bitcoin is becoming a safe haven option for those who are in Argentina. And this is really important. The last thing we'll talk about today is Bitcoin being a risk on and a risk off asset. We haven't really talked about that before, and now we're starting to hear about it. Some people think it's a risk on asset, and some people think it's a risk off asset. And a risk on asset means that when people are taking risks, i.e. when the stock market's doing good and when the economy's doing good, people are willing to take more risk. That's when Bitcoin's going to do good, because it's a high risk investment. So when people are willing to take risk, it's going to do well. And that tends to be true in the economies that are doing well. So people are saying, well, it's a risk on asset. But then you go to countries like Argentina, and the country is not doing well. The stock market crashed, I think, over 30% over the past 6 months or so, or more. They have capital flight controls like China. People are not doing well, and people don't want to take risk. So, they're in a risk-off environment. Yet, Bitcoin is something that people are flocking to. So, Bitcoin is proving to be both a risk-on asset and a risk-off asset. People are in the mindset where, hey, I'm doing well. I can take a risk on the best performing asset over the last decade. And other people are saying, my country is dying. My fiat currency is going to zero through hyperinflation. To protect the value that I've been able to create by working over my lifetime, I want to protect that value by putting it in Bitcoin. So really, Bitcoin is proving to be both a risk-on and a risk-off asset. It makes sense to be in Bitcoin in both cases. If you're doing well, then you take a risk on the best performing asset class in the last decade. And if you're in a situation where you don't trust your government and your economy is failing, well, then you trust math and you trust a digital economy that's flourishing and has been the best performing economy over the past 10 years. It doesn't matter whether Bitcoin is risk on or risk off. People from failing economies and thriving economies are interested in Bitcoin because it's a new system. It's different than the traditional system. And people now are starting to learn that this system was created to empower you. Sure, you give up privacy, but through its deflationary characteristics, you are able to gain purchasing power over time. And now, not only that, but just like the bankers who manipulate cycles within the traditional system, housing market cycles, stock market cycles, and they're able to adjust interest rates and the effects that those adjustments have, they're able to buy down low and sell up high. Well, we have a mathematical adjustment to the digital economy that allows us to use math to buy low and sell high, so we can grow wealth cyclically as well as grow wealth and purchasing power deflationary. So Bitcoin is really a digital economy that was created to work for the holders and work for the users of the currency in a way where financial policy isn't dependent upon a Federal Reserve or a centralized bank that can be manipulative and malicious in its intent, but it's actually mathematically created so that those who are paying close enough attention can be empowered by the digital economy. So this is where we are here today in the United States. Things are moving forward with Starbucks, options contracts coming out on the futures from the CME, Ripple moving into Washington, D.C., congressmen talking about Bitcoin, Libra, financial privacy, the threat of Bitcoin to the dollar, and then moving to the international stage, central bank digital currency. Central bank digital currency. Remember, it's different from cryptocurrency. Central bank digital currency is just a cashless society, and cryptocurrency is its own digital economy separate from the traditional banking system. And we see President Xi saying that we need to embrace blockchain. Ultimately, that leads to Bitcoin because that is the source of the original blockchain technology. And not only that, but Russia and China, both leaders being pushed to the forefront of the cryptocurrency space, and of course both leaders for a long time trying to work together to dethrone the United States dollar as the world reserve currency. And that regulation that we see moving forward quickly in the international stage is giving them an advantage over the United States, which is just going to hurt us even more. There's a lot going on right now. There's going to continue to be a lot going on. The exciting thing is we are 9 days away from the 180-day to halving window. If you haven't got your Bitcoin stacks figured out, you got 9 days to figure out your Bitcoin stack, because once we're within that window, it's at any time a new wave can come in and bring us to the next level. So thank you so much for joining us here on CIA News. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you soon.